Hi, you're listening to Treehouse Film Commentary, and I'm your host, Alline Cormier, the film analyst who puts women first. In this episode, I discuss Christopher Nolan's newly released biopic, Oppenheimer. For its cinematography, which is spectacular, and effective soundtrack, Oppenheimer gets top marks. It's a well-acted, compelling story. In 2023, however, that's no longer enough. The filmmakers disregarded half the audience, which is where Oppenheimer went wrong. 53-year-old British writer-director Christopher Nolan has a history of disregarding the female audience. 2005's Batman Begins, which he directed and co-wrote, includes just one significant female character, Batman's love interest. Also, no two women ever speak. Women probably get under 5 minutes of speaking time in Batman Begins. Inception, released in 2010, and which he also wrote and directed, scores poorly for women's presence and voice and has significant drawbacks, minimal exchanges between women being the least of them. Both The Dark Knight, released in 2008, and The Dark Knight Rises, released in 2012, which Nolan directed and co-wrote, also have little to offer female viewers. His 2017 screenplay, Dunkirk, which he wrote and directed, has no significant female characters, no named female characters, and women get under 1 minute of screen time. Nolan's main problem is his unwillingness to make room for women. His second is their portrayals. Of the 6 films of his that I've analyzed, none includes more than 2 significant female characters. And when there are 2, they're typically pitted against each other, as is the case in Inception, The Dark Knight Rises, and now Oppenheimer. Other drawbacks of Nolan's portrayals of women include their regressiveness and the fact that women only get to play supportive roles. His new biopic was co-written with Kai Bird and Martin Sherwin, authors of American Prometheus, The Triumph and Tragedy of J. Robert Oppenheimer. It stars Irish actor Cillian Murphy as the American theoretical physicist who oversaw the Manhattan Project's Los Alamos laboratory during World War II. Oppenheimer's 2 significant female characters are Kitty Oppenheimer, the nuclear physicist's wife, who is played by Emily Blunt, and Jean Tatlock, his lover, who is played by Florence Pugh. Other women play small parts and get very little speaking time. And true to Nolan's past depictions of women, Kitty and Jean are pitted against each other over the lead male, like Selena and Miranda, played by Anne Hathaway and Marion Cotillard respectively, over Bruce Wayne/Batman in The Dark Knight Rises. It's also noteworthy that it typically doesn't end well for one of Nolan's 2 significant female characters. In Inception, the death of Cotillard's character, named Mal, is depicted 5 times. In 2 of these instances, Mal is murdered. Miranda dies in a truck crash in The Dark Knight Rises. Jean Tatlock really did commit suicide in a bathtub, as we see in Oppenheimer, but depicting her suicide in detail in a scene that gets significant screen time was a choice, and Nolan shows us the suicide again later in the film through a flashback of sorts of Robert Oppenheimer's. Before her disturbing death, Pugh's character is hypersexualized. Unlike all the film's men, Jean is sexualized during her introduction. She is introduced serving Robert Oppenheimer a drink at a party where she meets him for the first time. In the next scene, she is topless, straddling him in bed later that night. He keeps his shirt on. Still later in a hotel scene, she and Robert Oppenheimer appear naked post-coitally, sitting in separate armchairs. Soon afterwards, we see her naked again, this time straddling a naked Robert Oppenheimer on a chair during his closed security hearing, watched by an ill-looking Kitty who sits behind them and imagines this scene when her husband admits his affair to the board. While Jean screws Kitty's husband, she looks Kitty in the eye. None of this is likely to endear the film to female viewers. Parenthetically, Similarly to Jean being introduced serving Robert Oppenheimer a beverage, in Batman Begins, grown-up Rachel, played by Katie Holmes, is introduced in the kitchen. In Inception, a woman serves Leonardo DiCaprio a drink. In The Dark Knight, a woman serves Gary Oldman coffee. And in The Dark Knight Rises, Anne Hathaway serves Christian Bale a beverage. In Nolan's world, women serving men drinks is the norm, like we're all waitresses or flight attendants. Evidence that he favors regressive sex roles isn't lacking. In the trailer for Oppenheimer, Jean only appears for a second, and unlike many men who make appearances, like Matt Damon, Kenneth Branagh, Robert Downey Jr., David Krumholtz, etc., she doesn't get to say a single word. The portrayal of Emily Blunt's character isn't much better than Pugh's. Kitty is an alcoholic and a bad mother. In an especially unflattering scene, Nolan shows us a drunken Kitty drinking while ignoring her crying baby. His male characters tend to fare better in their portrayals. Oppenheimer's female characters speak to each other very little. Near the end, a secretary gives Kitty a short message from her husband over the phone. Kitty only says one line to this secretary when she answers the phone. I think that's it for exchanges between the female characters. I can't speak to Oppenheimer's historical accuracy. Its greatest strength is its conflicted stance on the bomb's necessity. Robert Oppenheimer clearly has conflicted feelings about the development of the atomic bomb, and he's not the only one. I'll cite just a few examples. Niels Bohr, played by Kenneth Branagh, says to him, "You are the man who gave them the power to destroy themselves, and the world is not prepared." Robert Oppenheimer calls himself the destroyer of worlds. And at the end, Kitty says to Robert, regarding his decision to subject himself to the security hearing, "Did you think that if you let them tar and feather you, the world will forgive you? It won't." On its opening weekend, Oppenheimer, a Syncope and Atlas Entertainment produced blockbuster, lagged well behind Barbie, a film that has much to offer the female audience, undoubtedly due in part to its long running time, 3 hours, and heavy themes. However, Barbie includes a huge focus on patriarchy and depicts women overthrowing it, so it too offers much more food for thought than the usual summer blockbusters. 5 days after the simultaneous release of Barbie and Oppenheimer, Greta Gerwig's Barbie had earned twice Oppenheimer's box office receipts, $214 million versus $107 million. One might speculate that running time isn't the only, or greatest, factor in Barbie outperforming Oppenheimer. The two films' trailers make it obvious which one has more to offer women. Filmmakers disregard women at their own risk when female filmgoers are given a real choice. Next time, Nolan might rethink his disregard for half the audience. Oppenheimer is rated R. It has a running time of 3 hours and was released on July 21st. Thank you for tuning in to my Treehouse Film Commentary. Please comment, like, share, and subscribe.